Welcome everyone. My name is Andrew Nette. I am Link Digital's in-house writer and analyst. Today I'm talking to Ian Ward, one of our senior solutions architects, about a recent presentation that he did, Everything is Fair in Modern Data Dictionaries. Now this was part of the Canadian Polar Data Workshop 6, co-hosted by the Waterloo Climate Institute and the Polar Data Catalogue Canadian Cryospheric Information Network at the University of Waterloo. That's a public research university located in Waterloo, Ontario, Canada. Ian, welcome.
Thanks, Andrew.
Yeah. Let's start with the basics. What is a data dictionary?
Well, a data dictionary is a file that you typically publish alongside of a data set to give users information about how to interpret the data that you're giving them. So it can be anything from a simple list, could be a CSV file that lists the individual columns and what they're supposed to contain, or it could be a fully described Croissant file that includes provenance information and instructions on how to collect individual image files and make them correspond to tables in a database. So there's really a huge range of things that fall under that classification.
What are there core elements of a data dictionary, though?
The most important things are just titles and descriptions of what the data that you're actually publishing. So that can go down to the individual columns, or you can also have information about the controlled lists and things like that. But it really varies based on who the intended audience is. So if you're working in reproducible science, it's going to be very important that you have information about every single step that was involved in the production of that data. And so that would be an important part of your data dictionary. But for many users, just having clear titles and descriptions of the fields is still much better than looking at a plain CSV file, for example.
Okay. So why do we need data dictionaries? I mean, who can benefit from them and how?
Really, anybody that's going to be working with that data is going to be able to benefit from a dictionary like this, because it means that if they're building systems, that they can rely on the format that's going to be published, and they can see whether that format changes over time. Perhaps data that was published last year is going to be different than this year, and updating the data dictionary makes it clear that when they're doing that integration, that they need to account for that. But also the people that are publishing the data can benefit as well, because it forces you to think as a data publisher about exactly how you're going to format things. And you might potentially think while you're describing them, well, maybe as a consumer, this way of writing it might be better than another way.
Well, let's take an example. I mean, the people that you were addressing who were part of the Canadian Polar Data Workshop 6, what was their interest in data dictionaries?
Well, I tried to use an example from the Canadian Watershed Information Network website, and that's the sea ice levels on the Hudson Bay. Well, that's one of their most important data sets. And so I went through a bunch of different formats, a bunch of different possible ways of formatting a data dictionary for that type of data set. And when you're producing a data set like that, it might be obvious things like the units that you're using, or what a code means for a particular location where a sample has been captured. But for end users, that's not necessarily obvious. And that's a great place to include information in a data dictionary. So you can say exactly what units you're using, how a measurement is taken, and what the different codes that you see there actually correspond to in the real world.
Could you talk a little bit more about the role of metadata in a data dictionary and why it's so central to a data dictionary?
Well, they are essentially the same thing. We're describing the data that we're publishing, and so if that's the metadata in a catalog, or if it's a file that goes along with the data set, there's a lot of overlap there. And in many cases in CCAN, we automatically build Croissant data dictionaries using the DCAT extension from the metadata that's been added by users as part of the publishing process.
Okay. In your talk, you discussed how data dictionaries can help enable transparent, future-ready governments. Can you talk a bit more about that?
Well, everything is driven by the data that we're publishing, and being able to actually understand that is key to being able to turn that into the outcomes that you'd like to see. So really, it's even more broad than that. You know, anybody that's publishing and using data, which is almost everybody, can benefit from clearer understanding of what's being published and what's being consumed.
Okay. And of course, it wouldn't be a discussion about data in 2026 without some reference to AI. So governments are increasingly turning to AI to improve services, anticipate, citizen needs, things like that. But AI doesn't work without high quality data and without structured data. And I wonder how this relates to a data dictionary.
Well, it relates in a couple different ways. One of the formats that I was discussing was there's the Croissant format, and that was specifically designed for machine learning data, because that data is often extremely large and formatted very differently than your more typical data set that you might see, maybe produced with Excel. And so it allows you to tie together information like directories of files and tables in a way that you can then consume it with a system that would be used to train a language model. But on the other side, of course, all of these models are built using the data that we publish. So clearly having a clear understanding of exactly what's being published makes for much better training, so that you can actually build the types of systems that you're trying to do, whether that's with AI or with any kind of automated system. I have to say just how much of a pleasure it was to be able to present at the Polar Data Workshop, because there was, in the short time that I was there, I was shown a number of projects from some very passionate people that are working in the polar data space. The water data and polar data really touches so many different things. It touches politics, it touches sovereignty, especially around Indigenous peoples and the control over their data. So it was really fascinating to see some of the projects in that space and meet some of the people that are working on them.
Oh, that sounds terrific. All right, Ian, thanks very much for joining us.
Right, thank you, Andrew.